Usually when we think about our own minds, we operate under this illusion of control, Like you make a rational decision or you organize a thought, you categorize a memory.
Right.
It feels like this orderly waking life bureaucracy. But then you go to sleep.
Yeah, and that bureaucracy just completely falls apart.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic and impulse control, it essentially clocks out.
It just completely goes offline.
Yeah. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the emotional processing center, goes into absolute overdrive. So suddenly your brain is commandeered by this frantic, avant-garde film director who's desperately splicing together a family drama, a disaster movie, a gritty survival thriller, and a video game.
All while having a severe neurochemical breakdown, right?
Right.
It's wild.
It is a profound shift in consciousness. We're shifting from this executive-controlled state to a hyper-associative state. So the brain is no longer filtering out the absurd.
It embraces it.
It actively uses the absurd to process massive amounts of raw emotional data, which is exactly the landscape we are mapping out for you today in this deep dive. We're looking at a highly documented source text. It's a marathon dream journal from a single individual.
It's quite a document.
It really is. And we're going to deconstruct the architecture of this cinematic nightmare.
Because the goal here isn't just to, gawk at someone else's bizarre subconscious adventure.
Yeah, no, not at all. We want to decode the actual mechanics of how the brain stitches together mundane daily anxieties, pop culture schemas, and these profound themes of guilt into one cohesive simulation.
Yeah, if you've ever woken up with a racing heart because of a deeply illogical dream, what we are about to explore is the underlying software running that exact process.
The source material actually provides a perfect laboratory for this because of its narrative persistence. Like most dreams dissolve or fragment quickly, but this one sustains a continuous, escalating emotional thread.
Right. It begins with familial displacement, morphs into a natural disaster, devolves into systemic discrimination, and then it culminates in a violent cross-country struggle for survival.
It's threat simulation theory playing out in real time.
Absolutely.
So let's look at how that simulation boots up. The dream opens in a very grounded, almost uncomfortably relatable location. It's the childhood home, specifically the parents' bedroom.
A very primal setting.
Yeah. Right out of the gate, the brain establishes a primal emotional guideline. The dreamer is standing there, and there's a clear dynamic playing out. The mother blatantly favors the younger brother.
Right.
And because of this favoritism, there's this absolute rule established that the dreamer must leave. They're exiled.
So what you're seeing here is the brain initializing an emotional schema. The feeling of rejection or alienation is something we all process daily, often in microdoses.
Sure.
But in the REM state, the amygdala amplifies this into an absolute reality. And because the brain is an associative engine, it needs a physical environment to match that emotional isolation.
So the emotional displacement has to become physical displacement.
Exactly.
And it does. Immediately. The dreamer is suddenly on a beach. It looks like a Hawaiian resort, lined with hotels, very touristy.
A classic vacation trope.
Right. But to remind us that we are in a malleable simulation, there are these light, compact cars driving out on the surface of the ocean, like amphibious vehicles.
The amphibious cars are a classic marker of schema blending.
Oh, how so?
Well, the brain is pulling the concept of transportation and the concept of ocean and just overlapping them. Because the logical filter, that prefrontal cortex we talked about, it isn't there to say, wait, cars don't drive on water.
Right, right.
So it establishes a baseline where physical laws are suspended, but social structures are still operating.
And the brain isn't done escalating. That underlying feeling of rejection needs a more urgent physical manifestation. So a massive tsunami warning is issued.
The tension ramps up immediately.
Oh yeah, the relaxed resort turns into absolute panic. People are rushing to shore, abandoning the amphibious cars, desperately scrambling for higher ground. We have an apocalyptic natural disaster bearing down on them.
A literal wave of anxiety.
Right, and right in the middle of this impending doom, the dream zooms in on the most ridiculously trivial conflict imaginable.
It anchors the macro anxiety to a micro conflict.
Yeah, because the dreamer is part of a diverse travel group fleeing the tsunami, and one of the members is a recently joined Indian man who acts as their chef.
Okay.
So while a giant wave is about to wipe them out, this chef is absolutely furious with the dreamer.
Let me guess, over something entirely unrelated to the giant wave.
Exactly. The cause of this fury is that the dreamer lost a cheap, small frying pan at their previous location.
A frying pan. The brain's choice of a frying pan is deeply significant here.
It's incredibly specific. The chef is livid, making sure everyone in the group knows the dreamer is to blame.
Oh, wow.
So the dreamer is feeling this intense mix of indignation and guilt. I mean, they bought this frying pan with their own meager funds, so they feel a sense of ownership.
But they also feel the crushing weight of the group's judgment.
Yeah, so while physically running from a tsunami, the dreamer pulls out a smartphone and orders a slightly upgraded, higher-grade frying pan to appease the chef.
Just casually online shopping while fleeing for their life. And this action resolves the immediate tension with the chef. But let's look at the mechanism here. Why a frying pan during a tsunami?
Yeah, that's the big question.
In threat simulation theory, the brain creates scenarios to practice survival. But it also uses these scenarios for memory consolidation and emotional regulation.
Right.
The tsunami is the raw, unadulterated cortisol spike caused by the mother's rejection. But the human mind struggles to process pure, abstract existential dread.
It needs a tangible proxy.
Exactly. So it invents a missing kitchen appliance.
It's like missing a minor deadline at work.
Yeah.
And your sleeping brain exaggerates it into a scenario where the entire office building is actively collapsing into a sinkhole.
Yeah.
But your boss is still standing there aggressively asking about a minor typo in a spreadsheet.
That is a perfect analogy. The brain is projecting the dreamer's internal feeling of inadequacy, highlighted by the fact that they could only afford the pan with meager funds, onto the group dynamic.
Oh, I see.
The missing pan represents their failure to provide, their uselessness. The brain uses the chef as an avatar for the dreamer's own self-criticism.
It's a fascinating look at how we process guilt. You would think that once the new pan is ordered on the smartphone and the chef calms down, the brain would decrease the cortisol levels.
You'd hope so.
Right? Like the conflict is resolved. But the resolution of the frying pan dispute doesn't dissipate the tsunami. It just mutates the anxiety.
It finds a new target.
Yeah. The personal conflict metastasizes into a societal one. The physical environment shifts entirely away from the beach, and the threat of the tsunami is replaced by a deeply entrenched, racially segregated society.
So the brain abandons the natural disaster schema and adopts an institutional oppression schema. The dreamer and their diverse travel group are thrust into a lower class status.
And the source material is very specific about the visual representation of this. The high-class citizens who are oppressing them aren't depicted as traditional monsters or heavily armed stormtroopers.
Who are they?
They're just a procession of completely ordinary Japanese people walking the streets.
That neutrality is terrifying in its own right.
It really is.
The dream is neutrally portraying the mechanics of class discrimination to build a massive theatrical backdrop for the dreamer's internal persecution complex.
Yeah, because first the family rejected them. Then the travel group nearly rejected them over the pan.
Right, and now society at large is utilizing them as a disposable labor force. The brain is systematically testing the dreamer's response to different scales of rejection.
And the response is rebellion. The group decides to flee, and the genre of the dream instantly shifts into a claustrophobic espionage thriller.
Oh, a genre shift.
Yeah. They hide in a hotel corridor on the first floor, desperately trying to find a window to jump out of.
Very cinematic.
They're being tracked by 4 leaders of this upper class, and the dreamer is peering through these tiny, narrow, vertical glass slits, making direct eye contact with their pursuers.
Notice the spatial constraints the brain introduces here. We went from a wide-open beach to a narrow corridor with vertical slits.
That's a huge contrast.
It is. The brain is artificially restricting the dreamer's field of vision to force an increase in hypervigilance. It's mimicking the physiological state of being trapped.
To escape this trap, they run to a nearby building, and the building the brain conjures up is a Labor Standards Inspection Office.
The LSI?
The LSIO, yes. It's a modern, black-themed office, accessed by walking up a thick, sloping hallway that bends sharply into the second floor.
Think about the psychological function of the Labor Standards Inspection Office. In the waking world, this is a bureaucratic sanctuary.
Right.
It's an institution designed entirely to protect workers from exploitation. The brain's associative network routes the dreamer to the ultimate conceptual safe haven based on the current threat, which is labor exploitation.
It makes logical sense in the framework of the dream. They are an oppressed labor force, so they go to the Labor Protection Office.
Exactly.
But this is where I have to heavily question the narrative output of this simulation, because we have this epic life or death struggle against a terrifying systemic threat.
High stake.
The tension is at its absolute peak. They are hiding in the LSIO, pleading their case to the staff, and then, completely out of nowhere, a soap opera breaks out in the hallway.
The tonal whiplash here is severe.
It shatters the entire genre. One of the dreamer's teammates is engaged to a woman working at the LSIO.
Right.
The source describes her with hyper-specific visual clarity. Attractive, wearing glasses, slim, long, straight black hair.
Very specific.
Very. And while the group is literally begging for their lives inside the office, this woman secretly pulls the dreamer into that sloping hallway and aggressively seduces them.
Oh, wow.
She initiates a highly charged sexual encounter, and the dreamer, despite knowing they're being actively hunted by the elites, just goes with it.
In the middle of an espionage thriller.
Yeah, they repeatedly embrace in the dark slope of the hallway. Why does an epic struggle for human rights abruptly devolve into an illicit love triangle?
Well, the standard interpretation in dream analysis is that the brain is experiencing macro-level fatigue.
Fatigue.
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex is mostly offline, right? So the brain struggles to sustain a grand, abstract narrative like socioeconomic justice for very long.
That makes sense.
So to maintain the emotional intensity and keep you in the REM state, it resorts to micro-level visceral triggers. In this case, sex and betrayal.
I don't know if I buy that it's just narrative fatigue, though. Doesn't this feel more like the brain desperately trying to inject a dopamine spike into a system that is currently drowning in norepinephrine and cortisol?
That's a fair point.
Because the dreamer is terrified, running for their life. The brain throws in a highly arousing illicit encounter, not because it's tired of the story, but because it needs to physiologically balance the neurochemistry to prevent the body from waking up in a panic.
That is a very strong neurobiological argument, actually. The circuitry for fear and the circuitry for arousal sit very close to each other in the brain.
Really?
Yet when the sympathetic nervous system is heavily activated, like fight or flight, it can occasionally crosswire into sexual arousal.
Wow.
But we also can't ignore the psychological schema at play here. The physical slope of the hallway is a literal manifestation of a moral slippery slope.
Oh, that's fascinating.
The dreamer already feels an underlying guilt regarding their own worth. By betraying their teammate, they are actualizing that guilt. They are proving their own subconscious hypothesis that they are fundamentally flawed.
And the brain immediately punishes them for that self-actualized guilt.
Of course it does.
The dreamer pulls away from the woman, peeks back into the office, and the safe haven is utterly destroyed.
It's gone.
The teammates have violently beaten down the LSIO staff. And the teammate who is engaged to the woman looks at the dreamer, connects the dots, and screams, "Did you make a move on my woman?"
So the sanctuary has been corrupted. The dreamer is now entirely isolated. Family, society, and friends have all become hostile.
Yeah, nowhere is safe.
In the architecture of a nightmare, absolute isolation is the prerequisite for the final execution phase.
And the guilt demands an executioner. The brain rapidly shifts the environment to provide one.
Right on cue.
The high-class society they were hiding from arrives in force. The building is surrounded by special forces, snipers, people with bows and arrows.
An army.
Yeah, and this is where the simulation aggressively deteriorates. The modern, sleek, black-themed office building instantaneously rots.
Just decays.
It decays right in front of the dreamer's eyes, transforming into a crumbling, moss-covered stone ruin made of stacked rocks. The city vanishes, replaced by an uncharted, dense jungle.
So the brain is actively discarding the modern bureaucratic schema and pulling from deeply ingrained historical or cinematic schemas.
Like an adventure movie.
Yeah, the mossy ruin in a jungle implies a place outside of civilization, a place where brutal ancient laws apply.
And the auditory cortex joins the party. The dreamer distinctly hears traditional Japanese bamboo flute music playing in the background.
Oh.
It is incredibly dramatic. The dreamer realizes this is the end of the line. The four teammates have already dug a hole near the wall and buried themselves to hide, leaving the dreamer entirely exposed.
The bamboo flute is a brilliant, highly specific associative pull.
Why is that?
It evokes the aesthetic of classic samurai cinema. The lone warrior facing an honorable, inevitable death. The brain is setting a very stylized stage for the climax.
But the dreamer doesn't panic. They don't beg. Instead, they make a conscious decision to become a martyr.
Wow.
They step up onto the small rocky roof of the ruined office, press their back against a massive rock wall, and decide they're going to be executed boldly to send a powerful message about discrimination.
A massive shift in agency.
Huge. The snipers are mocking them, laughing, yelling, "Dance for us!" And the dreamer actually starts dancing in the crosshairs.
That's incredible.
This feels like a surge of lucid defiance. The dreamer is trying to wrestle back director-level control over a simulation that is crashing. Like, if I have to die, I am going to dictate the cinematography.
It is a moment of emerging lucidity. The prefrontal cortex flickers briefly online, allowing the dreamer to inject conscious will into the subconscious narrative.
Right.
But the underlying mechanics of the dream will not allow for a clean, heroic exit.
No, they won't. The snipers open fire. But instead of lethal lead bullets, they shoot bizarre, needle-like projectiles.
Needles.
The source describes the physical sensation in vivid detail. It's a prickling, agonizing pain, a chiku-chiku sensation. The dreamer's entire front torso becomes a pincushion. There is no space left untouched by these needles.
Oh, that sounds awful.
But crucially, they don't die.
And this exposes a fundamental limitation of the dreaming brain. The somatosensory cortex, the part of the brain that processes touch and pain, it can pull from waking life memories to simulate physical distress.
Like if you've been hurt before.
Exactly. If you've been stung by a bee or pricked by a needle, the brain can replicate and multiply that data to simulate the pain of being shot.
Okay, that makes sense.
But what the brain's predictive engine cannot do is simulate non-existence. It has no experiential data for death.
Because if you die, the simulation ends, and you either wake up or transition to a different sleep stage.
Exactly. The brain often refuses to shut down the narrative, so it forces the simulation to continue through the suffering. The needle bullets are an elegant computational workaround.
Or workaround, yeah.
They inflict the maximum psychological and simulated physical punishment without triggering the game over state.
Realizing they aren't going to die, just suffer indefinitely, the dreamer abandons the martyr complex and scuttles along the rock wall. They turn a corner and find a massive hole in the ground, wide enough for 20 people.
A literal descent.
Inside this earthy, mossy jungle pit is a pristine, bizarrely out-of-place spiral staircase.
And this staircase features a highly incongruous detail, doesn't it?
It does. A plush, high-quality red carpet. It makes absolutely zero sense visually in the middle of a jungle ruin.
It makes perfect sense if you understand that the brain has fully adopted a video game framework.
Really? How so?
The red carpet isn't an architectural feature, it is a cognitive waypoint. It's the glowing marker telling the player the next level is down here.
Oh, like a guide.
Yeah, it's a spatial navigation tool used by the hippocampus to organize the transition between memory structures.
That's wild. So the dreamer decides they can't leave dirty footprints on the fancy carpet, so they literally dive down the empty center of the spiral staircase.
Jumping into the void.
Yeah. As they fall, they grab the handrails of each floor, swinging like a monkey to break their momentum until they land safely at the bottom.
We are witnessing a descent into the subconscious underworld. The gamification is solidified. We've moved from the evasion stage through the execution stage, and now we are entering the boss arena.
They land in a vast space that looks like a historical Japanese or Chinese palace. But immediately, the dreamer senses an overwhelming, oppressive presence.
The boss.
They describe it as feeling like a god or a massive final boss. The entity has projected its consciousness throughout the entire palace. It knows exactly where the dreamer is hiding.
This entity is the culmination of all the unprocessed guilt, anxiety, and neurochemical stress manifested into a single, insurmountable avatar.
And the boss reveals itself. It is 3 to 4 times the size of a normal human, carrying a sword larger than the dreamer's entire body.
Terrifying.
It slowly walks toward the dreamer, while the soldiers from the surface start climbing down the stairs to cut off any escape.
So they're completely trapped.
Completely. The boss raises this colossal sword high above its head. The dreamer bites their lip, braces for the impact, accepts that this is the end, and just as the sword swings down, they wake up.
A textbook stress response awakening. The amygdala drives the heart rate and respiration up so high that the brain forcefully ejects the conscious mind from the simulation to protect the physical body from the perceived trauma.
Now, normally, if you experience a stress response awakening from a giant sword, you wake up, you realize it was a dream, your heart rate settles, and that's the end of it.
Usually, yes.
But the source material reveals that the dreamer falls back asleep. And instead of the brain clearing the cache and starting a new dream, it just hits continue.
The neurochemical environment hasn't reset. The lingering cortisol and adrenaline dictate that the threat simulation must resume.
So it just picks up again.
But as with many sequels, the brain struggles to maintain the slow, atmospheric dread of the first half and compensates by massively ramping up the kinetic violence.
The geography violently shifts. We are no longer in a subterranean palace. The brain drops the dreamer into a bustling tourist spot in Kyoto.
A huge change of scenery.
It's vibrant, decorated with brilliant gold leaf and statues of Ebisu, the god of fortune. It is a stark, jarring contrast to the mossy ruin.
Yeah.
And standing right there in the crowd are the dreamer's mother and older brother, the same mother who banished them at the very beginning of the dream. They are happily sightseeing, completely oblivious to the danger.
So the brain is cycling back to the foundational schema, the family dynamic.
Yeah.
Even after the world-ending tsunamis and giant gods, the underlying drive remains unresolved.
Because the dreamer is now being actively hunted through the Kyoto crowds by a squad of 7 assassins.
Oh.
And what does the dreamer do? They don't run away. They use themselves as bait. They desperately try to draw the assassins away from the mother and brother who previously exiled them.
The guilt is still dictating the behavior. The dreamer feels a compulsive need to protect the very people who rejected them, perhaps as a way to finally earn their place back in the family unit.
The combat here is incredibly brutal. Every time the dreamer tries to get close to their family, an assassin grabs them from behind and whispers, "Found you."
Creepy.
Very. The dreamer engages in visceral hand-to-hand combat, punching faces, using a pad to literally cave in the assassins' heads.
The prefrontal cortex remains offline, meaning moral inhibition is entirely suppressed. The brain has authorized lethal force in the simulation.
After dispatching the 7 assassins, the dreamer realizes they need to get back to their own house. The spatial mapping warps again.
Where to now?
Suddenly, the gold leaf of Kyoto is gone, and they are standing in a rainy, gloomy Tokyo. Oblivious commuters are walking by, and this is where the brain makes some deeply unsettling casting choices.
Unsettling?
The next wave of attackers aren't faceless assassins. They are 2 of the dreamer's actual, real-life, old friends.
This is a fascinating repurposing of facial recognition data.
Really? How does that work?
Well, the fusiform face area of the brain stores the visual templates of people we know. Usually seeing an old friend triggers a positive emotional response.
Sure, normally.
But here, the brain is forcibly associating familiar faces of trust with the schema of betrayal.
The source notes that the friends are heavily distorted. They are tall, over 180 centimeters, and they are attacking the dreamer with traditional Buddhist-style statuesque clubs and massive hammers.
Why arm old friends with Buddhist religious weaponry?
Yeah, that's so specific.
It introduces a thematic element of karmic retribution. The brain is communicating that the dreamer isn't just being attacked randomly. They are being punished by their own past, by the people they used to trust.
The odds are impossible, but the dreamer is operating on pure animalistic survival instinct. They manage to defeat their giant hammer-wielding friends using incredibly dirty tactics.
Like what?
Gouging their eyes with fingers and bashing their heads in with bricks found on the street.
The deterioration of the dreamer's internal morality is complete. They started the dream trying to do the right thing, buying a replacement frying pan, seeking help at a labor office.
Right, very civilized.
Now they are blinding their old friends with their bare hands in a rainy street just to survive. The simulation is stripping away their humanity layer by layer.
Exhausted, the dreamer wanders toward a highway interchange near a gas station. They are on foot. They are trying to get home to Nagoya, which is hundreds of kilometers away from Tokyo.
A long walk.
A passerby asks, "Are you really going to walk?" And the dreamer, full of grim determination, says, "I'm going." They plan to run the entire way, take a 2-day break somewhere, and just keep running.
This specific moment beautifully encapsulates the waking life exhaustion of the modern individual. The brain translates the abstract feeling of an impossibly long work week or a daunting life obstacle into a literal physical marathon. You have 0 resources, the distance is insurmountable, but you have no choice but to start walking.
But the sleeping brain operates on a system of bizarre shortcuts. It doesn't actually want to simulate a multi-day run, so it acts like a frantic DJ, mashing up random semantic nodes to create a shortcut.
What kind of shortcut?
A stylish foreign man wearing glasses pulls up in a light truck, the kind with a fuel tank strapped to the back. He looks at the dreamer and says, "I was deeply moved by you," and literally gives the dreamer the truck.
A literal deus ex machina. But the criteria for earning this reward is where the associative logic of the dream truly fractures into absurdity.
I am still trying to wrap my head around this sequence. The foreign man explains he was moved because he witnessed the dreamer trying to intervene in a street murder. The dream pulls two completely unrelated, real-world Japanese celebrities to stage this murder. Taichi Kokubun, a famous musician and TV host, is cast as the son of Tatsuo Umemiya, a legendary tough guy actor.
That is quite the casting.
In the dream, Kokubun shoots Umemiya in the head with a pistol on the street. The dreamer tried to stop the celebrity patricide, and that heroic act earned them the truck.
If you look at this through the lens of network theory in the brain, it actually makes a strange kind of sense.
Really? Because it sounds like total nonsense.
Well, the brain wants to grant the dreamer a vehicle to bypass the running sequence. To do that, the dreamer needs to earn a dopamine reward by doing something heroic.
Okay, right.
The fastest way for the brain to stage a dramatic, emotionally resonant scenario is to use highly recognizable nodes, in this case, the prepackaged faces and personas of celebrity.
But why those two? Why a son shooting a father?
Because the foundational theme of the entire night is family dysfunction.
Oh,
The dream started with the mother exiling the dreamer. Here, the brain stages the ultimate family destruction, a son murdering his father.
wow.
By having the dreamer intervene and try to stop this familial collapse, the brain allows the dreamer to subconsciously process their desire to fix their own broken family dynamic. The celebrities are just easily accessible avatars used to act out the play.
So, having saved the day in the most confusing celebrity cameo possible, the dreamer gets the truck, they drive through the night and finally reach their destination. They make it home.
But the concept of home in a nightmare is rarely a place of comfort.
The dreamer arrives, and it is absolutely not the parents' house from the beginning of the dream. It's a dilapidated, rotting house. The source explicitly compares it to the house from the video game Resident Evil 7.
That's horrifying.
It's creepy, the floorboards are decaying. Inside, there's a room looking like a makeshift office with a long desk and cheap pipe chairs.
The brain has synthesized the two most stressful environments from earlier in the dream, the bureaucratic labor standards office and the rotting jungle ruin, and combined them into this final arena.
Inside are a group of allies. They look at the exhausted dreamer and say, "There are still pursuers after us. Please, fight with us."
No rest for the weary.
The dreamer, who has already fought through literal hell, just nods. The allies offer them a weapon. They bring out this aluminum medical box.
Okay, a med kit.
But when they open it, it doesn't contain bandages or scalpels. The inside is a glowing video game user interface, floating digital buttons allowing the dreamer to select a weapon.
The gamification schema has completely taken over the simulation.
Completely.
The brain is now rigidly applying the rules of a survival horror game to manage the final encounters.
One of the allies looks at the dreamer and asks, "What on earth have you been using to fight this whole time?" And the dreamer reveals the most insanely specific, mundane detail. They point to a thin, 1.5-meter long wire.
Not a sword, not a firearm, a 1.5-meter wire.
They don't even use the magical UI weapon box. The dreamer walks to a staircase leading down into the darkness. A zombie-like enemy is slowly shambling up the stairs.
And what do?
The dreamer calmly uses centrifugal force, whips the 1.5-meter wire around, strikes the zombie in the head, and instantly kills it. The allies are in awe. They say, "You are so strong!"
Notice the psychological shift here. The dreamer is no longer a victim being exiled or hunted. They have achieved mastery over the environment.
They really have.
They are competent, lethal, and admired by their peers. The brain is delivering a massive dose of dopamine to counteract the hours of cortisol.
But the simulation demands one final boss. Crawling up the stairs behind the zombie is a terrifying chimera. It has the head of a lion, but the limbs of a human.
A classic mythological monster.
It's dragging its body along the ground. It looks slightly weakened, but it opens its massive jaws to consume the dreamer.
And the wire.
The dreamer, completely unbothered, whips the wire again and dispatches the lion-human monster with ease.
They have conquered the apex predator of the dream. They have protected their allies. From a threat simulation perspective, the brain has successfully completed its run. The threat has been neutralized.
So the dreamer walks down the stairs, fully expecting to clear the level and maybe get a victory screen. But when they reach the bottom, the environment violently shifts one last time.
Another shift.
The rotting Resident Evil house vanishes. The dreamer is suddenly standing in the living room of a perfectly normal, quiet house belonging to a mundane old couple.
This is where the underlying neurobiology begins to change.
What's happening?
The rapid eye movement cycle is likely ending, and the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic, consequence, and morality, is beginning to boot back up as the brain prepares for wakefulness.
The dreamer, however, is still operating on the survival schema. They look around for resources, they see a standard medical-grade handrail leaning against the wall, the kind elderly people use to assist with walking.
Right.
The dreamer thinks, I'll take this as a weapon, and reaches for it.
And this is where the ultimate rug pull occurs.
The old woman living in the house steps forward. She isn't a monster. She doesn't have a giant sword. She just looks at the dreamer with utter disappointment. And she scolds them.
Scolds them.
She says, "You have killed so many people. I trusted you, and now you steal from us. Scoundrel."
Scoundrel.
Yeah.
The word choice is incredible. It immediately recontextualizes the entire night.
The juxtaposition is absolutely staggering. This dreamer just used a wire to brutally execute a lion chimera. They blinded their old friends. They survived snipers and giant subterranean gods.
And what entirely defeats them?
A scolding from a disappointed grandmother.
Exactly.
All the action movie bravado evaporates in a millisecond. The dreamer is instantly reduced to a scolded child. They bow their head and simply say, "I am so sorry."
The prefrontal cortex has fully reasserted itself.
It's back online.
Throughout the dream, the amygdala provided escalating justifications for the violence. They were oppressed, they were hunted, they were protecting their family.
Right, it all made sense in context.
The brain built this elaborate, gamified world to make the dreamer feel like their extreme aggression was necessary for survival. But as wakefulness approaches, the logical, moral center of the brain looks at the data and strips all of that away.
The cinematic context vanishes.
Exactly. Without the action movie filter, the dreamer isn't the hero. They are just a chaotic, violent force trying to steal a handrail from an elderly couple.
It's brutal.
The conscience demands absolute accountability. The brain forces the dreamer to confront the reality of their actions without the protective shield of the survival narrative.
Utterly defeated and deeply ashamed, the dreamer apologizes, leaves the old couple's house, and walks outside. The environment shifts one final time.
Where do they end up?
They are on a historical, beautiful row house street in Kyoto, walking through a peaceful crowd. The thread is entirely gone, and in the most random, inexplicable final piece of associative dream logic, they spot Masato, the former K1 kickboxing champion, just standing casually in the crowd.
Of course.
And with that final celebrity cameo, the dreamer finally wakes up for good.
An incredibly complex journey of memory consolidation, threat simulation, and emotional regulation.
To quickly trace the architecture of what we just explored in this deep dive, the brain took the primal wound of family rejection, anchored it to the anxiety of a lost frying pan during a tsunami, escalated that into a systemic institutional betrayal at a labor office,
Yeah.
simulated an execution in a jungle ruin, routed the narrative through a video game underworld, and then continued the simulation into a cross-country marathon involving distorted friends, celebrity murders, and a Resident Evil climax.
That's a lot.
Only to aggressively deconstruct the entire heroic narrative with a simple scolding from an old woman.
It sounds absurd, but it reveals the profound mechanisms of our own neurobiology. It shows how our brains utilize spatial mapping to organize memories, how we repurpose the media we consume into a visual vocabulary for our deepest anxiety.
Yeah, that visual vocabulary is wild.
And how the conscience ultimately strives to maintain our moral equilibrium, even in a simulated environment.
It is a masterpiece of subconscious processing, but I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay.
Throughout this massive, violent, multidimensional epic, the dreamer was constantly running, fighting, and defending themselves against perceived injustice. They went through literal neurological hell.
They really did.
But considering the prefrontal cortex booting up at the end and that old woman's devastating scolding that stripped away every single excuse the dreamer had, could this entire exhausting, agonizing nightmare just be the brain's way of brutally punishing itself simply for losing that tiny, cheap frying pan at the very beginning of the journey?
Oh, wow.
Next time you close your eyes and the script suddenly flips on you, just remember your brain is just trying to clear the cache, and it's not afraid to use a lion chimera to do it.